Do you get stressed? If the answer is yes, it's the same with livestock. Today, we talk about the animal stressors and how ranchers work to minimize them. Welcome to Hashknife Hangouts. I'm Calen. My co-host and father, Brandon, is the guy on the other side of the screen. If you haven't already, like, comment, and subscribe. Below are the handles to our social media at Facebook, Instagram, Rumble, and Twitter. And finally, a big thank you to all of our returning viewers and subscribers. There are many ways you can stress animals in ranching, and often it is by accident or a simple result of maybe inadvertent ignorance. And that's not to say anything bad. It's just maybe just people don't know. Or maybe they do and they just choose not to do anything to fix the situation. But there are common things that people do to cause stress, which we will discuss. However, these actions have impacts on the animal's welfare and, depending on the situation, can have negative effects on the meat you consume. So to begin, I'll go down the line of common animal stressors and then I'll pitch it to Dad for his initial take. But a lot of things to think about are your presence in general, vehicle usage, which we covered, I think, last episode, handling with the animals, movements around the animals, potential issues during the birthing process, either foaling or calving, and then natural issues, as in weather and that sort of thing. So with that, I will pitch it to Dad.
You covered it. Episode over.
Well, that was nice. All right.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I mean, there's different types of stressors. When you think about us as humans, there's distress and there's eustress, right? Eustress is a good kind of stress. It's that thing that's like a little competitive edge.
Right.
That's a stressor, right? But you perform better. And I really can't think of a lot of stressors with cattle that are a eustress, except the only thing could be is maybe, when they see a feed pickup, you're bringing feed to them or something like that, I mean, they'll kick their heels up a little bit or
maybe
putting
a
out
distant
mineral.
Well, I was thinking, or a distant honking of the horn, because then they know,
Yeah.
there's the feed truck on its way. Because that's kind of our telltale sign when we're coming out of the feed yard is pop, pop. And they're like, oh, hey, here comes
Occasionally we'll do that.
food
Usually you
bucket.
don't even have to do that. They hear the thing start. They know which vehicle starts. They can hear it by the engine noise and the exhaust. They really do. You start one pickup and they're like, they don't even bring their heads up. If you start that feed pickup, which has a little more distinctive sound to it than anything else, and their heads are up and they're walking towards the feed ground. So that would probably be a eustress, I guess, because they're looking forward to something. It's not really, well, some of them are competitive because they'll fight, and butt heads and get a little territory over a chunk of grass. But yeah, there's all kinds of different stressors, and just even if you're not around, we're in the middle of calving right now. I guess we're just a hair over 40% done, and when you watch these cows, if they don't know you're watching them, and they're having a calf, that's stressful enough. That is stress, and they'll a lot of times they'll go off by themselves a little ways. Even a heifer, especially some of these heifers, I guess, they're isolating themselves to get away from everybody else, and I think just being around other cows stresses them out.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, and so they're moving off. You just kind of have to. I mean, that's an assumption on my part, but not just the younger ones, older ones. They all kind of tend to do that. There's a few that don't, but for the most part, they'll try to isolate themselves a little bit. And then when you watch them during that calving process, and again, especially if you're not in their vision or they don't know you're there, you watch them, they're panting, they're uncomfortable. That is not a good stress. That is, and especially a heifer that has no idea what's going on. This is the first time for them, and they're like, what's happening? They're up and down and they're rocking around, and they're panting. And then they're straining, and then they kind of figure out once that calf's out, then it all kind of comes together if you're lucky. They want to take that calf. Some of them, I've got a couple of them here that they want the calf, but they want to beat it up a little bit too, because apparently they're mad at it. They understand what's made the connection of why they hurt so bad, and this is the cause of it. Like, well, no, that's just the result of what you did there, pumpkin. But yeah, so there's just that natural stress on their own, but we can add to that horribly by just interjecting yourself into that whole
Right.
situation. And then that now they're taking their awareness away from what they're doing, because you can see them, they're in a world of their own when they're calving. But when you then step in there, you can see that their attention is distracted and they're focused on you and what you're doing, and they don't want to be around you. They'll try to remove themselves away from you too. They'll get up and they'll walk away. They'll move
Right.
off from the spot where they just chose to lay down on their own. So
Well, and that's what brought this whole thing up for me. Actually, was I was going through Twitter because if nobody knows now, we have an official ranch Twitter, and if you see any tweets, they are coming from me, but it's a lot of it's all ag stuff based off of solely the things that we talk about a lot, and getting more information. And one of those things was a picture of about 9 people in a small stable with a mare, and she was laying down and you could see she was foaling. And I'm like, the amount of stress that's going through that animal, just for the fact that people are standing there. They
right.
could be quiet for all I know, that and everything's going on, but just the fact that their human bodies are in that stall with her while she's trying to foal, I was like, wow, you are really, like, that is not fair to the animal at all. And I think that was what really brought that's what stemmed this for me, and I wanted to talk about that. And I think you did a great segue into that with the cows, because the cows are like that too. And people, I think, realize cows are more of like a kind of a distant creature in a sense, but everybody thinks of a horse as like a pet, and when they go to do stuff like that, it's so stressful on that animal, and it's not necessary whatsoever.
Yeah, I was teaching a clinic one place one time years ago, and there was a brand new foal hit the ground that morning.
Yeah.
And the conditions they had it in, they were in a stall. They had some pasture area, but this woman, and she thinks she's doing the right thing. You know, she's really trying to do the right thing. Otherwise she wouldn't be doing it. Right. And she's got this mare in a stall that's not that clean. I mean, it's like not got fresh shavings, or it's not, and it wasn't dry. It was, kind of mucky. And I'm like, God, well, Colt picked up an infection, a naval infection, very quickly. And you know what? She hadn't had that colt. I'm wrong. She hadn't had that colt when I got there. The colt was about 4 or 5 days old, maybe, but she still had it in the same stall.
Yeah.
And the vet got there, and the vet was one of these guys, and he was pretty crusty, and I got pretty thick hide, and even he would be like, wow, geez, I mean, for no reason. I mean, that's just the way he was, but he was very plain talk. He didn't mince words, and he kind of laid into her. He said, leave these mares alone. You let them out in a pasture.
Yeah.
You do what you can for them, but leave them the hell alone. You've caused it. I mean, he just ripped into her. And, now she's got to clean this wound on a navel, and you got to put an iodine tipped Q-tip up into that navel, swab it around. And, that's a stressor. That's a stressor on the mare that you're handling the colt.
The baby. Yeah.
The baby is now being, assaulted. Good luck with what that's doing with some behavior.
Yeah.
That's not positive imprinting there.
No. Well, again, that's the problem too, is it sets now a reminder in that little one's head, probably for a while, that, oh, every time a human comes out, I'm going to get hurt.
I'm going to get hurt, and it's going to hurt my belly. Yeah. And so that's tough. I mean, you can overcome that, but why would you need to?
Right.
I mean, and things happen. I'll get that. It just does. But when you set things up that it can possibly be a higher chance of it happening, that's even worse. And yeah, I was like, wow, okay. And she's paying him to talk to her like that, but you know what? She needed to hear that.
Yeah.
And the same thing, they go out there and they're checking them every hour, or some people will stay with that mare. They'll sleep out there. I was like, leave them alone. Your presence is a stressor. And
I understand if people want to monitor and stuff, but
right
now we have such affordable
cameras.
Technology with cameras. There's no reason to be out there. You can put that light on there with an infrared source, and you'll be perfectly fine.
They are very inexpensive if it's a single light or single camera source. I mean, Yeah, there's no reason not to. So um that was that was a big deal. That's why we always calve out except for the heifers, but and I'm checking them. I am. I'm going out there of course, I just got back from doing that.
I was gonna say that's why he's a little puffy eyed this morning.
Yeah, a little puffy eyed. Well, and
Yeah.
those, you do that 10 and 2 and 5 or 6 and so, and then you can't get back to sleep because you're worried,
Right.
or you just can't get back to sleep because all of a sudden you're thinking about market prices and is there going to be any rain, and please
Moving
rain,
on
God,
to vehicle
please.
usage.
Yeah.
But this is another part too, is with vehicle usage, it is also presence, and it's just a
Yeah.
different type of presence. You're using uh, a machine, and like we talked about, I think it was, like I said, I think it was last week, the use of ATVs and stuff like that. Oh, that's what it was. It was a shoot. It was a shoot episode. It'll be coming out mid-May. That's what it was. But the use of ATVs around animals, horses and cows. When I'm talking livestock, for us specifically, I'm talking horses and cattle. I would probably take a gander and guess that people probably don't do much things differently with sheep, frankly, but there could be some different practices, but we try to use the pickups for bringing things out, like food, and that's it. You're not trying to push the cows or anything like that. ATVs, again, check out that shoot episode in mid-May. But we don't use it to scare the animals or anything like that, and I think that's the important part, because the movement of those manufactured technological four-wheeled things, it can cause, there's noise, there's all sorts of movements with it, there's other sounds. It's just, it causes more stress to it, and that's why I think it's important that we talk about that as well.
But it is the context too, because you can take again, the feed pickup, or we got the side by side that is really handy. I'll use it to put mineral out.
Right, and it's
Because
actually
I can
pretty
put a bunch of
quiet. It's more
it's
quiet than the
fairly,
pickup.
yeah. But I've also those cows love that salt and mineral, and so just like hay, you could have hay laying out, or you can have mineral in a bunk, and it's not quite used up. And I try to use it up, but it might not quite be. But you stick that vehicle out there and you start messing around with that salt and mineral, and they'll come to it. So it's all about the context of what you do. But if you got in there and started running them around, different story. And I
Right.
will use it. I will use a side by side to check cows. The cows out in the pasture, the older cows, calvy cows, looking for calves, and they are not bothered by it. Now it also helps that occasionally we'll grab a couple of sacks of cake and feed with it. Bring them in. And that's how your mom, she's kind of like the Pied Piper, Cinderella, Snow White, all in one. We've talked about that, and so they see that as a positive thing, and they'll come to it. Again, that maybe that's you stress with them. They're getting a reward for it, or maybe it's just plain a reward. It's not really any stress at all. So that's an important part about context. Now, if we start running them around and banging them and hooping and hollering with it, it might be a little bit different story,
Right.
how they'd react to it.
Yeah, I think it's important to point out, though, that when you're trying to minimize stress for the animals, you're not, again, I think that's a great point of making the point of saying it's all in context, because the intent of the use of that vehicle can change a lot of it. Is it
Right.
malicious, or is it there to help and to feed and to make them happy, so to speak.
Right. Right. Or at least they get a reward out of it.
Right.
And it depends on what you're doing too. There's that kind of stress. Just handling them in some facilities, in your corrals, is stressful, because you're there.
Well,
I mean, you
that's the
can't
next
avoid
point.
that stress. Yeah.
That's
Okay.
the next.
All right.
No, that's good, because I mean that's unavoidable. And there's
Right.
another thing too that I want to point out after the handling of them, which it does involve the handling, but it's a little different. But you're absolutely right. The sorting, the noises. We're about to
Well,
go into branding in about 2 months.
you're crowding them.
Yeah.
They're they're an animal that, they don't mind pushing on each other, but if you watch, they also space themselves out. They've got some personal space.
Right.
And that personal space is how you can move them quietly in a corral with, and reduce that stress, is that you're not banging on them. You're just approaching them, giving them a second, and they'll usually, as you encroach on their little bubble, like you do, people, they'll move you away from you. And usually if you run in there fast, of course, you're gonna mash their bubble and they're gonna explode out. If you gently just walk in and you just use your presence to do that, your energy, then they'll move away from you. And you can do that very quietly, and they're not stressed about it. They are stressed, but not as stressed.
Right. But I think
and
that's the point I want to talk about, though, is like there that's an unavoidable stress, because at some point or another we have to handle them at least a few times a year. It's not just, it's not just the one event. We acknowledge that, but it's also not like we're going out there every single day and we're trying to stress them. This is something that it's an unavoidable stress that all of them have to go through at least once a year, talking about the calves, because the calves will have to come in to get branded, potentially rebanded if their rubber bands broke, which that's pretty rare.
I haven't seen it happen.
But the fact that you're absolutely right, and we have to push them through the corrals, we have to get them sorted, which that's another stress in itself, because mom is now being separated from baby, and there's all sorts of balling between the calves and the cows, and then the actual going through the chute, because that's something that they don't like either, but they have to do it because we got to get them either deloused, we got to get them vaccinated, we got to get them branded, we got to do all those things.
Just the calf crop alone.
Right.
When you're handling a calf, to begin with, when I'm putting an ear tag in its ear, that's stressing it.
Right.
And so you do that as quietly as you can. And I try to do that on the ground now. Just lay them down, put the ear tag in their ear. If it's a bull, you lay them on the ground and let that cow be right there to sniff it. And hopefully she's just sniffing it and not going to run over you. I mean, there's some risk involved there, but she's stressed. Right. Yeah. She would like, hell, go ahead, take him. If you want to take him in the house for the night, watch some TV, that's okay. Go ahead.
I think there was a clip from last year. I'll see if I can put it in here, but there's a clip that of you. He actually had an undescended testicle, so you were trying to get the band on him, and it took forever. But she was just sitting there letting you do it and had no problem with it.
Hi, baby girl. This can be your last baby. We're not going to ask you to have any more.
I don't need you to lick me.
She wants to make sure you're doing it right. Good girl. Oops.
I need you to relax a little bit. Yeah, I know. Ears, I don't have anything for you. Well, and actually we did not do that because I wanted to let that descend, so he never got banded.
Okay.
And so he's going to be one of our lean butcher animals. We're feeding him, held him through the winter, and so this fall he's going to start getting fed up, fattened for butcher. But he's going to be, because he's a bull, he'll have a lot of cutability, a lot of meat, and then a little bit more lean. He won't have quite the fat that a steer or heifer would have. But anyway, she allowed that. Took a long time. I had a cow the other morning that was, your brother's got him marked on our calving sheet. If there's an asterisk by its name, it means mean mom. He put on there. And I've known her for, a couple, 3 calves now. She's always been the same. She is just honky. And otherwise, a week later, she lines right out when that calf can kind of run on its own, and she is not that concerned about it.
But it's those initial days.
Those initial days, good maternal instinct, but almost a little too good. But it's not so bad that I want to get rid of her. But, I just laid him down and I'm banding this calf, and you think I could find the testicles on this?
The one that you really need to get done.
Yeah, the one you need to do speedily, of course, and I'm thinking, the way your brother puts it, it's funny because he was not well endowed. Let's put it that way. So it's hard to find him, and you're kind of, you're moving their legs and stretching them out, and that's a little hard. You're trying to avoid doing that. And so the longer you have them laid there, the more stress it is. Even if they're really young, it's still stressful, so you try to handle them as quietly, gently, with the cow right there. quit stressing her, and she is stressed to the max because now you're doing something to her calf. Even though she does this every year, um, it's just the way it is. So how you do it, staying quiet, not getting excited, not getting mad, those are all that emotion that you put into something, it carries through and they can feel it. Those cows can feel that emotion. And
Well, and to tie it back to the handling part in like the corrals, when this is also a reason why we don't drink when we're handling animals, because people, they get stupid and they start getting a little rowdy, and then that carries over to the animals, the livestock. And whether it's malicious or not, sometimes just your actions alone start scaring them and getting them concerned, and then you start having what we call rodeos, and we don't want rodeos in the corrals.
well, and something different, anything really different will stress them. I got these heifers up in the corral right now. Most of them, the ones that are close to calving, the other ones I've got out the pasture. I just keep kind of watching. They're with the calvy cows because why bring them in and feed them forever and not have them calve. So I brought them in to begin with, and my first check out there at like 10 at night, I've got a flashlight. It's darker than inside of a cow. It's particularly a black Angus cow, so not that it makes a difference, right? So I'm walking out there and I've got this flashlight, and they're like, what? And they're, starting to run off. And so I turned the light on myself and I put it on my chest, kind of highlight my chest, and boom, they calmed right down because then I could see what it was. So I mean, that's something new. How often are you going out and around these cows with a light?
Yeah.
You're not. Well, now it didn't take, but a couple of I don't know, a couple of days of checks, at a couple, during the night, during the dark, doing that, and then they realized what it was. And I'm talking to them, I'm just using my voice, and then they know who you are. Now it's like, yeah, you can walk right up to them. Fact is, I was using one of them's got an ear tag kind of turned backwards, and it just bugs me, just my anal, everything's gonna be right. And so you learn about a curtain of light, about safety issues and staying behind a curtain of light. And I went, huh. So I walked up to her and had that curtain of light, and I got close, and I was just right there at her ear. And as the second I touched that ear tag to kind of grab it and flip it, yeah, I think I stressed her. So
there you go.
She was just used to the light, but I could get that close to her with it. But then all of a sudden something new again,
right,
which was touching her. And she's like, nope, I ain't having this. So that was just a good example of something new that is, they're used to one thing, and then you change it a little bit and something happens. So I didn't need to do that, but it just couldn't help myself.
Now, when you're working with people who may not be familiar with cattle, and they come to help with like branding and things like that, what are some of your tips that you normally tell them or ask them to do when it comes to handling, so that you can minimize the stress on the animals? Because like I said, we know it's a stressful event for the animals, but typically the newbies are the ones that are going to cause probably the most stress, just simply out of like what we said at the very beginning, just sheer ignorance, not because of malicious intent or anything like that. They just don't know. So what are some things that you've always told people, like, hey, please do this, please do that. I'd really appreciate if you did this, so that it keeps everybody calm and unstressed.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, if you don't know, it's something, it's not your fault when you cause a problem. So it's an opportunity to teach somebody something too. It's like, hey, now they know how to do this, and there's a skill, and there's got to be a little pride to that, hey, I know how to do this now. And so I'll explain not just what to do, but why you're doing it. And just talk them through. It's like, okay, these calves are going to come up through here, and they're going to come through the chute. And yeah, we got somebody pushing them, but they're going to resist because you're standing in front of them. Just back off away from the chute, away, where they can't necessarily see you. And then they'll come in, and you're kind of hiding by sides and stuff, and don't move. Don't be flopping stuff around, just don't move. Yeah. And when they go past you, then you can kind of approach them, and it kind of helps push them away if they are looking behind them. They got about 270 degrees, vision.
Yeah.
So they can kind of see you move off to the side, and somebody's pushing them up a chute, which again is a stressor in itself, but they won't resist quite as much if they think they can go through, and they can see through the end of that chute that, hey, there is light at the end of that tunnel, and I'm headed for it. So, they'll try to jump through, but the whole process of branding is very high stress, even if it's as low stress as you can make it. And we use a calf table, which I don't like doing that. I like to be able to keep these calves, in a corral with a few cows, and rope them, drag them, have some wrestlers. It's faster. I think it's way less stress on them as an individual, because they're handled for just a short time instead of being put in a crowd tub and held there while one goes through at a time. Having a few of them there together helps, but it's still stressful. But having folks know what to do, know what's going on, and the loud noises, and it's loud anyway. I mean, you got a propane fire going on these branding irons. You've got people talking, and it's a good time to just get together, and you got things clanging and banging. There are some things that you just can't stay quiet with, but you don't need to add to it.
Right.
So, just sorting the cows. If you got a couple of people in there that haven't done it before, how to sort a cow, how to move in a corral, which direction to drive that cow depends on where the gate's at in the corral,
Yeah,
So
I think
there's
that's
all
another
kinds of
thing
things.
too, is just the efficiency. It's not just the efficiency part that we normally talk about, but it's the efficiency in the sense that it's causing less hangups and less issues amongst the cows, because if you're trying to push them to a gate the wrong way, and they're like having to go out of their way to come back, like it just causes more and more friction points throughout the whole process, and it causes them to, you get irritated, they get irritated, more
Well,
balling
if it doesn't
happens.
work right, now you're going to start moving around more, and now you're going to get into this challenging type where they're like, oh, I don't want to go that direction, so I got to go past them, and now you've just given them the opposite need to go where you don't want them to. So yeah, move them the way they naturally want to move, and things they'll sort themselves almost. Working in an alleyway, there's a way to do that. You stand off to the side, give them a little time. Time is what is speed,
Right.
time, or smooth.
Well,
slow is smooth, and smooth is fast.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So move slow, move off to the side, give them space, and you can just stand there a lot of times, and somebody will want to move. Same thing as in a conversation. If you don't talk, that is wild and weird for humans. We want to fill that. You want to fill that empty space of silence. Same way with a cow or an animal. You stand there long enough, they're going to want to move, and they're very observant, especially when they can be observant. But when it's in a tight quarter like that, they feel that pressure, and they're going to want to move.
Right.
Somebody will, maybe not all of them, but somebody's going to move, and then you can use that to your advantage.
Well, and that's another good set. Dad, you're just setting me up for great pitches today. All right.
Yeah, I'm telling you, it's what I do. I'm not just a pretty face.
Movements of animals, though. That's the next one. Is, we're talking about the movements within the sorting and all that, but there's also moving from the pasture in for branding.
Mm-hmm.
There's movements from the pasture to summer pasture.
Yep.
And then there's movements from summer pasture back. So those are stressors in themselves, just because you have to move those animals. And a lot of the times in the summertime, when we are moving them, we will do it early in the morning, because we know it's about to get hot, and you don't want them working when it's hot, because it's in the cooler temperatures. And so we'll try and be up there 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, get it done before the sun comes out.
and you're set. Yeah, you're set up before you're ready to go, so that the minute your eyes can start picking up light, theirs can. And that's when you're going to start working. I mean, how many times have I've done a couple of film from horseback when we're gathering, and for my eyes, you can just see, but when you put the camera up there, it gathers light and it looks a little bit lighter, but you're still, early morning is cool. These cows do best at about 45 degrees. Their metabolism is such that well, in the summertime, it rarely gets to 45 degrees. You might get down to, high 50s at night if you're lucky in the spring. And so you take advantage of that time that you can, because it doesn't take long for a cow or calf to overheat, especially when they're moving, and because they're not normally moving, they're not going on a walkabout. They're wandering and slowly grazing their way to somewhere, unless all of a sudden they go, hey, I'm thirsty, and so they head to water, or hey, no, I want some mineral, so they they mostly take a lot of time going to where they want to go, unless they're on that specific mission, then they'll walk their way through it. But it's not at higher speed, and that's the way we want to move them, is not high speed.
No, and that's a good point too. Is I didn't even think about that, but absolutely, we never take the horses or the ATVs or anything like that and try and push them as fast and hard as we can.
No.
And there's dust getting kicked up.
No.
We are, if they amble along at their speed, they amble along at their speed. We just manage where they go. We will push, and then we will keep them in a left and right limit, but they will just go at whatever speed they naturally walk.
Well, and you take some calves that are a couple months old,
right?
You know, and you're taking them to summer pasture. You might have some that are, you know, 2.5 months old, say, because we tend to calve a little later. We calve, you know, first part of March, middle of March this year, but those calves will always lag behind. They're not going to keep up with those cows, and those cows, they're smart. You know, they know where they're going, and they're headed to some fresh grass.
So they get excited,
and they are.
Maybe that's a little eustress, huh? Eustress.
Yeah, it might be a little
eustress.
Yeah, because your mom's in front of them trying to hold them back, you know, a lot of times, and you know, you get a bunch of calves balled up in the back. Well, that's just the way it is. So you're trying to hopefully keep these cows so they're not hurrying, slow them down so these calves can keep up, because all of a sudden a calf decides, hey, I don't see my mom. I haven't seen her. I get a little rumbly in my tumbly here. I got to go back to where I last nursed. And that's what they'll do. And so then they'll start fighting you. They'll want to go back. You got to keep them moving forward. And so you might have to start putting a little bit more pressure on them to keep them moving. Otherwise, if they decide they're going to turn around, sometimes these older calves, and when I say older, they might be 3 or 4 months old, and they're like, or 3 months, and they're like, hey, yeah, I know where I need to go. You don't know what you're doing. And so they're taking off and trying to go back. Well, you got to keep them with the herd and keep them moving, following those cows that they can't see or don't care to see. And so that in itself, sometimes you have to use a little bit more pressure. And you try to avoid that at the beginning by slowing that cow down. But, you know, they get lost. They get in a herd and they're starting to travel. And sometimes that calf will keep up with the cow. Some are really good about it. Others are like, no, it's getting hot. I'm slowing down and I'm stressed because, you know, it's again 60 degrees now and the sun is up and they're feeling the heat of that ball of fire in the sky is starting to warm them up. But all that exercise, you know, they're been chewing on milk spigots for, you know, a couple months. They're starting to eat some grass, but they're stressed. You know, that's not something normal for them. And you're certainly exercising them way more than they're used to.
Now, we did talk about tagging and banding and how you minimize that, but sometimes there's also the portion where they're coming into the world, man, and it's not so friendly. Sometimes it's a little
it's a hostile world out there.
Yeah, well, sometimes it's just straight up complicated. Sometimes there's minor issues, but that in itself is a stress. How like, for example, when you have to pull a calf because something's going on, what do you do to try and minimize that stress as much as possible? Because, man, that's a hard one to try and get through, but it's clearly a stressor. It's just like any other emergency situation. Everybody's going to be stressed, but what are the ways or the things that you do or put in place to try and minimize that and keep it as low as possible?
Speed is everything on the preparation part. Be prepared ahead of time.
Yeah.
So, you know, I've got everything set up so that I can, you know, especially these heifers, they're up close and I can just do everything on foot. You know, just walk. There's no sense in getting on a horse to walk, you know, 100 feet. That's crazy. So you've got them in, but the calving cows out in the pasture, I may have to get a horse to bring them into the corrals. And now I've got the same setup for them that I got for the heifers. And so I got it set up so I could pull a calf at the outside chute, what we, you know, normally use to do our preg test and that sort of thing. But I've also got a head catch in the barn and set up with a jug. And I've actually had 2 cows at a time in there. We have a small operation. We're not calving 400 head.
Right.
So, you know, we're not calving early. So for the most part, we can get away with that. But I've got a heater set in case, you know, I pull a calf and it's cold, or we have a calf and it's cold, we can get them in there and at least getting them out of the wind, just getting them in the jug and not necessarily in the heater helps. But how you pull that calf is important. I let that cow, give her enough time, try to do something. And I had one the other day. The only one I've pulled so far this year. We're approaching halfway through, which is, well, I'm halfway through with the heifers. But
And that was a heifer, correct? That was her first time.
yes,
Yeah.
correct.
So that might be part of it too, is like to keep people in mind. Like this, I mean, I guess you could say this is part of minimizing the stress. We breed a year later so that they're more fully developed and easier to calve. And so typically, because they don't quite know what's going on, sometimes that causes them to have difficulties the first calf they have. But dad was able to successfully pull that calf out. The calf did not want to wake up. He was like, nope, I don't want to. Nope, it's cold. I don't want to be here.
Yeah, none of them are going from 104 degrees to all of a sudden it's 45 or 40.
Yeah.
But when I'm watching, you got some feet coming first, and she was pushing the calf was headed the right way, that was head first, but she just was not progressing. And I think she wasn't pushing hard. She wasn't trying as hard as she could, is really, I think, what it amounted to. But you can only wait so much. So much time goes by, and I gave her a good hour after I saw, okay, she's really not progressing. She was progressing slowly. I thought, well, maybe she'll get this in her head and she'll figure it out. But finally, I thought, you know what? No, we're going to go ahead and pull this calf. And I worked her up into the barn, and she was no problem getting up, and she just walked right in there, set the gates, closed her up, and you just keep confining her to smaller and smaller spots, in those jugs. And the small, I got kind of one that's like a triangle shaped, a right triangle where a side and a back, and then I just slide across or push across the gate, which then becomes a chute, and open the head catcher, and then I open everything up where I can work. But then it's a matter of working fast. I've got my gloves right there. I've got my strap. I've got all my stuff to pull. And it sounds unorthodox, but we've got it's just a chain that I can adjust the length to. Just a chain that's attached to the plank on pole as part of the construction of the building, and a come along. Not doesn't have any mechanical advantage with a pulley, but just a plain come along, because I'm tightening it up, and then I'm just kind of putting pressure on it. So instead of using a typical calf puller that goes around their hips in a bar with the same thing, it's just a jack, and pulling that calf and then pushing down on the bar, I find that this is better. I've got a little more control with it this way, especially when they do exactly what this cow did. Is a heifer, is she laid down, and you've got this big long thing that's 4 or 5 foot of pipe sticking out behind her, and you can't do anything with it. So this way I can still continue to put and apply pressure where I need to, and I wait for her to have a contraction. And you got to be patient. When she does that, then I'll give her a push or a pull while she's pushing. And so the problem with it is the speed at which you work is, I have rarely seen a calf that I really needed to pull that come out and wasn't stressed, because if it wasn't stressed, you wouldn't be pulling it. Right. And the first thing I could see, I could feel the nose up in there, and I thought, okay, everything seems fine. She's just, I determined, yeah, she's not trying very hard. And it wasn't an overly big calf by any means. Well, I start to see a nose emerge, and there's a tongue sticking out. I mean, it's hanging out, and I'm like, oh crap, like it's dead. That's a stress. When an animal's got that tongue hanging out like that, it is stressed. And I saw the tongue twitch and went, okay, it's still alive. This is a good sign. And so it's still, again, it's speed, and not forcing her to, and not just pulling that calf out, but working with her. She'll be much more likely to, not tear, not cause problems. I mean, you can kill a cow doing that. So doing it as easily as I can, aiding her in her natural process, but doing it as quickly as possible. So with that kind of makes some sense. And that was not an easy pull. That was kind of tough on on her and the calf come out, and yeah, he wasn't breathing real well. And I, cleaned his face was cleaned off as he came out, but he wasn't doing anything. And I thought, okay, he's got a bunch of mucus down in his throat. And so I was holding him up, by his hips and picking him up to kind of drain him out. And I wasn't getting much drainage, and tickling his nose. And finally he started sneezing and blinking his eyes and all of those good signs that you have. And finally he was gasping for some air. But I don't know. He he took a little bit of time to kind of figure things out. So we may have somebody who's a little bit oxygen deprived.
Yeah,
It's possible.
Sense. I wondered that.
But he's doing well. I mean, I kept him up close, watched her for signs of any kind of complications from pulling, and then watching the calf. And and I think he's a little bit stiff-legged. I think probably pulled on those joints a little hard getting him out. But as of last night, he's bouncing around, and he knows where to go. He knows where to go for lunch. Yeah. And she wants him. She was out feeding and came back. She left him in the corral. She brought him in that corral and left him there. And then she went out and fed, and then come back. And he was getting hungry because he started following other cows out that were coming in for water. But he found her, tail twitching. Now there's some eustress when that calf was eaten, and that little tail is just moving back and forth. I mean,
yeah,
they're happy calf.
Now that's with calving issues, natural issues that you really don't have much of a say over, but you can kind of have an impact to minimize it for the animals, like excessive heat, any storms, lack of water, disease. You can kind of do it by vaccinations or quarantining animals, but
it's all preventative.
Right. And then the changes in environment's really probably the biggest one. So if you just like put them all in a trailer and then drop them off at a totally different ranch or something, that's something too. But what are some ways of trying to minimize the stress out of all those different things?
Well, again, what we'll do when we brand, for instance, and it's no different when you do that than when you move them horseback to another pasture, or you haul them somewhere. If you're hauling pairs, you're trying to protect those babies, and you're hauling cows in one or half your load, and you got the cow and calf together. And I keep those cows separate from the calves so they don't, especially if they're small, so they don't kill them. Yeah. And giving them time to mother up. You have got to do that. You got to let those cows and calves get back together. And these cows are funny. They know the routine, but they don't care because they're on fresh grass, and they're going to fill their bellies. They could care less about that calf. And then pretty soon they'll slow down on how they're chasing this grass around and trying to club it to death. And then all of a sudden they'll start finding their calf. He said, yeah, you know what? Maybe I better look for them. And these calves, I'm trying to hold them all together. And you find a pair and you kick them out. And you just kind of make a process of elimination, but you let them try to find themselves if you can. But taking the time to do that, you'll have some horrible wrecks. Those calves will go back, and they'll crawl through fences because they can. And the desire to go back to where they last nursed is strong. Right. And, that's survival. So they'll hit that. And those cows get hung up at a fence. I've seen some horrible wrecks before. Been involved with them when I was a kid. And it's like, oh, those are big learners, yeah, don't do it that way, and some of the older guys are like, I don't think we need to do this. But their boss was like, no, we need, and like, okay, we got to hang these calves. You got to make these calves stay up here. And pretty soon you got calves that are, I mean, they're making a break for it. They look like a bunch of bank robbers.
Yeah. I think we're going to have a shorter episode just on that. Cause the fact that they can like geolocate where they were last, like it's crazy.
It is. Yeah, put a note on them and like a homing pigeon.
Now, but with like we talked about heat, like how we kind of mitigate with the heat, but what about like storms? What's a way to try and minimize things with storms? Because obviously there's cracking, there's thundering, there's wind, there's all sorts of stuff.
You can't do anything about it.
Yeah,
you're not gonna do anything about it. Take a look at them after the fact, and
good luck.
The hardest part about calving is if you got a newborn, and even rain. When you get wet, when they come out, they're wet, and that cow's licking them off, and they're stimulating that skin and the blood flow, and they're waking them up and getting them going, but they're getting dry. That getting that amniotic sac off of them and drying them off is so important. But if they're born or calved during a rainstorm and it stays rainy, they never get a chance to warm up. And that can kill a calf, and you get other things like scours, where you've got an intestinal issue that they basically like diarrhea. And, that's a stressor in itself. So trying to get them dry, when it's a wet, heavy snow, but it's not that cold, it's cold to them and they can't get dry. Getting the milk in that belly and then getting dried off. If you can do that, that calf can take a lot of harsh weather. It's amazing what they can take, but you got to get them on their feet and some milk in their belly and hopefully dry it off. And I've brought calves in when it's been raining and they're just, freshly calved and they're just not doing well. So try to get them in, inside. It's really nice inside that barn, or at least get them on something to lay on that's getting off of that wet ground. That really helps a bunch. And stress of life, just being born it's amazing. Some of them make it and some of them don't. There's where the will to live comes in too. Some of them just don't have it.
Yeah. Well, and just a quick moment with that before we go on to like the results from stress and everything. When it doesn't work out and you do lose a calf, that's a stress for the cow because now she doesn't have the body. And so what's a way to kind of minimize the stress with her and to allow her to grieve too? Because they kind of laugh at that, but animals, they need to grieve just like we do.
Absolutely they do. And we had one, I think it was last year, the year before, maybe it was year before. And that cow's, she was always a really solid cow, produced a good calf, real maternal. And I saw her out there and thought, oh, she's got a calf, and went up to go tag it and it's deader than a doornail. And what had happened is she didn't get it cleaned out. The sack didn't break when it calved, and she didn't get its face cleaned off and it suffocated. It died. And she was very maternal. She kept, licking it and pushing it with her nose, trying to get it to get up. And, I went up there and I saw it was dead and was like, okay, well, I can see what happened. There's no sense in getting in there. She's upset. And so I just backed off and I'd let her have it. She stayed with that calf for a good 36 hours, never left it. She didn't go in for water, and she was just laid right there with it. Give them time. Let them have that. They'll figure out pretty soon that this calf isn't going to follow me, and they'll get thirsty. They'll get hungry, and they'll start grazing around it, and then they'll go for water and come back, and they'll spend less and less time. And then I'll give it usually a couple, 2 or 3 days that they start kind of coming out of that and ignoring it, and then I'll go pick it up and take it to a bone pile. But yeah, that's super stressful, and I don't care what people say. Animals grieve.
Yeah.
Especially newborns like that. Those cows, and a cow that's had a calf, she knows what's supposed to happen.
Right.
And it's just unfortunate that, she didn't get to it. And I was like, God dang it, and I mean, it's just the way it goes.
Yeah. But I thought that was important because, that's the part that people, they forget about because it's kind of, I think it's convenient to forget about, frankly.
Well, and there's also the stress. You talked about environmental stress a little bit ago. That makes a huge difference on whether a cow is going to breed up or bull's going to work and conception. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to that. Well, and some that I don't even know if we really totally understand.
Well,
there's research that's done on it.
That was the results part that I was going to talk about. That I got some of it from a quick abstract on an article written by Temple Grandin, and she was talking more slaughter stuff, but there was also a lot of things that, like you talked about with the fertility. So some four big results from stress that I found were fighting within the herd itself, loss of weight. We talk about that constantly. Susceptibility in disease, and then reduced fertility. So first, with fighting in the herd, that causes problems that bruising, injuries, stuff like that. Loss of weight, that sucks for us because of market. Don't run those cows, don't run those calves because you're knocking off weight. susceptibility.
If you want to be a team roper, do that in town where they have roping steers. Don't do that
Yeah.
to your calves.
Yeah. Susceptibility and disease. I mean, when you start losing weight and you're not, maybe your immune system's getting kind of knocked down, of course you're going to be susceptible to disease. And then, like you said, finally, reduce fertility. You know, if it's hot, first of all, the bulls don't want to work. So there's a potential that, hey, this is hard work. It's hot. I don't want to be doing this. And then the fact that, hey, maybe it just, which is weird to me. I agree with you. We don't quite understand it, but like the fact that just the environment just goes, yeah, you're just not going to get that many fertile cows this year. Like,
Well,
how does that work?
and when you think about it, if it's super hot, and I think that's kind of going to be some breed specific too, because you got, some of your southern breeds,
Like longhorns.
yeah, we've got the Boss Indicus, and they've got what,
Boss,
escaping me right now.
I was gonna say Taurus, but that's
Boss Taurus and Boss Indicus. Yeah, sorry,
okay,
we
I
got
was
Boss
right.
Taurus up here. They're Boss Indicus in the south, or these, hotter weather breeds. If you get environments that are, especially, way hot, they tend not to breed. What's going to happen with that cow? Why are they doing that? A stressor like that, yeah, I got to take care of my body, so I can't produce another body. I mean, that's normal. That's very understandable. But some fluctuations in that are less than that, I think, have some effect. There's some research on it, but especially, I think more research has been. I shared one thing with an article with you about dairy cattle, and
Yeah, and I
not
think
talking about.
we'll talk about that later because they found
Yeah, I
something
think it's a
else
good thing
too.
to. Yeah,
But yeah, it's just weird how the different things that we still don't quite know about
right.
have a big impact on daily operation.
Yeah, we're yeah, you got some scientists, some of our experimental places that are doing this research, have done great research in the past, and they're continuing to do some things along these lines. So, but when it comes down to it, you're still not going to necessarily be able to control your environment, especially large places. You're not going to get them in an air-conditioned barn. That in itself would be a stressor, right?
Yeah.
So, and I'm just going to start feeding. Actually, today is day one of about a 60-day regime for fattening a butcher animal. And that stress alone on that causes less fat to be deposited, so I want this animal calm, quiet, and happy to see me. Now, when I'm out feeding, it happens to be a heifer. She's right there. I mean, I can put my hand on her neck, and she's after feed, so she's not afraid of me. That's great. That's a good start. Brought her into the corral, and she's going to be, learning that, hey, this white bucket has got some good stuff for me. She'll have some free choice, and grass and hay, and then this grain that we're going to start feeding her, warming her up to it, and increasing the amounts. But that stress for 60 days doing things can make a difference on how that animal is fattened, how it retains fat or gets fat. And then the end of that is when I take her to the slaughter, take her to the butcher, I'll drop her off. I would just won't drop her off and they'll harvest her. I'm going to drop her off and she'll get the same routine there. I'll take her of an evening. I'll be feeding her twice a day. I'll feed her that morning, take her down. That ride in that trailer is stressful.
Right.
And that will change the taste of the meat, some adrenaline. They can't help it. But those people who do this they're pretty savvy about cattle. They've had cattle. They know what's going on, and he's a third generation in the meat cutting business, and along with it, other things that they do on the side. But he wants those cattle down there the afternoon before or the evening before. Let them settle down through the evening, and I take some feed so they can feed them. I feed them out that night when I drop them, and then the next morning I leave enough for them to feed that animal up and calm them down, and hopefully he goes ahead and harvests them while they're feeding on their grain mixture that they're so used to, and it's a calming agent as well, and it makes a big difference. So just that will make a way for you to do things to reduce the stress on that animal. for
And
then your benefit for how it tastes later.
from Temple Grandin's abstract that I read on her journal article, that she's done a lot of things with kill plants and
Yes.
not only just efficiency, but then to do exactly what you're talking about, low stress for the animal, because it results in different flavors of the meat, and it does not benefit the flavor, trust me, because when you get adrenaline going, it messes up that flavor. So she's talked about the different ways about going about minimizing stress for the animals. I just thought that was cool, because that's the part that ties all this together: low stress for the animal throughout its lifetime, and then up until the very last second of its lifetime, so that it doesn't cause also for us, the consumers, a bad cut of meat.
Right. You want the most palatable piece of meat that you can have, right?
Right.
You want it tender, which means fat deposition. You want it tasty, which means fat deposition, and then you want it also to be not complicated and reverse all of that by being adrenalized. So yeah, Temple Grandin she's just an amazing woman. For those that don't know her, she's autistic, Asperger's autism. Believe that she is a professor at Colorado State University, has been. She's got a lot of books out there, videos. I've been to 2 presentations that she put on, and she does a lot of her thing. I think basically was she keyed in on her observation skills of things, that sometimes she sees things that other people don't. And you do, but you know a lot of these things if you've been around it a lot. But she has really revolutionized the slaughter industry, and the amount of injuries that took place has been phenomenally reduced just because of the way she said these animals, they need to be treated this way, or your facilities need to be set up where, they have a lot of big long S curves in the facilities. Well, you know that because they can't quite see
Around
what's
the
at the end of
corner.
that,
Yeah.
and they'll follow through it. And it's made a huge difference on the whole industry as overall, and better for the animals themselves, more efficient, no injuries or less injuries, almost no injuries in some cases. It's amazing. But yeah, she's a neat lady, really neat lady.
Yeah. Well, with that, today we went over animal stress, how to minimize it, the different types of ways stress comes out with human presence, vehicle usage, handling, movements from pasture to pasture, any potential issues during the birthing process, and then of course right up until the very end when we harvest.
And that's not all. There's other stressors out there,
Yeah.
So introducing other cows to other cows, that's a stressor. So especially if it's not a formal introduction, they have to figure it out on their own. And with that, we thank you till you're better paid.